Now, let's start now with Matthew. He's now online. He's with his camera. Hey, Matthew, how are you?
Hey, Alan, yeah, happy to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for being here. We are also happy to have you guys here on this Autotech event. We have seen today many samples and proposals in the mobility industry, in the services of the mobility industry, and you're the last one today. But of course, there has been a lot of interest, and there's the biggest interest here in Colombia is the electricity, the electrification of the vehicle. So I think this will be really interesting for the audience today. So we have today Matthew Bloom. He's from AmpUp. He's the director of business development and utility partnership. I will switch to Spanish, okay, to make the presentation. Anyhow, you can, Matthew, put the English channel. You have a Spanish and English channel. It says interpretation in the Zoom menu, and then you can choose English and then stay there in English, so you can hear everything that we talk in Spanish into English, and that's the way it works, okay?
Got it.
Bueno, voy a empezar en español. Matthew, antes de su cargo actual en AmpUp, dirigió los esfuerzos de capital de riesgo y estrategia corporativa de National Grid. Trabajó para Pfizer, Nextcracker Technology y fue cofundador de una empresa de diseño web. Él es asesor del Departamento de Energía de Estados Unidos en materia de energía distribuida y miembro del Comité de Tecnología Limpia del Foro Empresarial del MIT. Matt es licenciado en Sistemas de Información e Informática en la Universidad de Quinnipiac y tiene un máster en Gestión Tecnológica por la Universidad de Georgetown. Vamos a ver un poco de la empresa AmpUp. Ellos ofrecen soluciones de carga eléctrica distribuida o también compartida. Ya nos explicarán un poco más de qué va las soluciones que tienen. Y hoy nos hablarán de soluciones de software para vehículos eléctricos inteligentes hoy y mañana, today and tomorrow. Ellos harán una breve reseña sobre la electrificación de los vehículos, incluyendo información estadística sobre el crecimiento del mercado de los vehículos eléctricos en los últimos años y los tipos de hardware de las estaciones de carga. También se hablará de la diferencia entre las estaciones de carga L1, L2 y L3 y la diferencia entre las estaciones conectadas en red y las no conectadas. Nos presentarán los protocolos de punto de carga abierto y su importancia y las características del software de vehículos eléctricos que ayudan a los anfitriones del sitio, los que hacen la carga, y a los conductores a maximizar la experiencia de energía limpia. Además, compartirán información sobre los despliegues en Estados Unidos de su red y de su servicio y lo que han aprendido en ella. So, Matt, are you in California, aren't you? Located in
I'm in Boston, Massachusetts,
okay.
actually.
Okay, so
yeah.
the company, okay, great. So, well, thank you so much again for being here, and I will stop sharing my presentation, and then you can share your presentation, and it's all yours. Okay, you can start.
Okay.
Yep, that's it.
Great.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Alan. And really excited to be here and present for everyone today. Yeah, so Matt Bloom, Director of Business Development here at AmpUp. I didn't know I was last, Alan, so no pressure, right, for the last presentation of the day.
No. It's still early here in Colombia. It's 10,
right.
15.
Yeah, the same here in Boston. So yeah, I wanna touch, obviously on AmpUp and what we do, but also really highlight, electric vehicle charging, where it stands today, and really where it's going. I think there's a lot of, educational points I want to make in today's presentation that I'm usually, using in my own sales position with new clients and customers. So I think we'll just dive in, but yeah, thanks again for the opportunity. So yeah, I think briefly, what will I touch on today? Who we are, an introduction to EV charging as a whole. What are some of the basics or things I recommend people know about electric vehicles and charging before they, adopt a project of their own? And then I'll speak to a little bit of our own experience of a, a special project we've done recently and some of our key learnings from that project. So who is AmpUp? So thanks for that great intro earlier. Yeah, AmpUp is an electric vehicle software company. And so what that means is we really enable drivers, the electric vehicle drivers themselves, to find charge stations and use them. but we also help the charge station owners, so those who have installed the charge station, manage them. And what I mean by manage is typically set a price for your charge stations, collect analytics, get revenue from that station, do things like determine who has access and when. Those are some of the smart controls we're enabling a lot of charge station owners to use today. We currently operate in all 50 states, as well as Canada, Mexico, Puerto Rico, and various European countries. So we're expanding very quickly and are already in talks in Latin America and South America as well. We're also one of the most, I'll say, integrated software partners when it comes to EV charging. So we work with about 20 different hardware manufacturers of the charging stations, which gives us a lot of, I'll say, choice over what we present to our customers. Charge stations can really vary by how fast they charge a car, how expensive they are, do they have an LED screen, a lot of different functions. So we like to give our customers a lot of choice over what charger makes sense for them based on their budget and their needs, and then pairing that with our software to make it work for them. We also partner with a lot of electricians, right? It's hard to install an EV charger, it turns out, and I'll dig into that a little more. But electrical contractors, the electricians in the field are really important to get these chargers installed to allow people to charge at them. And last, we're approved with quite a few different utility companies. Probably not a surprise to a lot of people, electric utilities are very, very interested in electric vehicle chargers and what that will mean for their grid. There's a lot of impacts to that are coming in the future and that we're seeing now. So the closer we work with those utilities, I think the better in the long run. I'd say, three things stand out for AmpUp of what we try to provide to our customers, and that's ease of use, transparency, and affordability. The reason is because EV charging is so new and quite complicated. To the average person, I think there's very little they know about EV charging. So we really try to simplify things for them in a way that makes them feel more comfortable to adopt the charger. So I think through our relationships today and our team and their backgrounds, we have really good knowledge across North America about the EV charging programs, the utilities, incentives to help pay for stations. All of those are really important to the customer. And we participate, directly with a lot of utilities. We talk to them a lot to learn about where the market's going. Some other highlights here. My background personally is in the utility and government, world. So I was at National Grid, a very large utility, before I came to AmpUp. And I think that knowledge has really transferred over to an electric vehicle startup. National Grid does a lot of EV charging work of their own. So it's good to see sort of both sides of that coin. And last, I think the smart features that we offer, I think, are really unique. So while we try to simplify the customer experience for EV charging for a lot of people, I think we have some pretty neat features that are pushing the envelope on where charging can go. So those are things like reserving a station ahead of time, sort of like booking a hotel room, right, or booking a table at a restaurant. Things like load management, so controlling how much energy can come out of a charger at a specific time. And then having the ability to manage, chargers at different sites. You might be a property group who has, say, 5 different locations, and you have, 4 chargers at each. You might want to manage each of those, 4 chargers, at each location differently, different access, pricing, you name it. So we think those smart controls are really important. And briefly, our ecosystem, who do we work with? The last couple of years have been really exciting for us. I'd say, inked a lot of deals with some pretty key brands, right? And you can see it's a pretty wide array of different types of companies here. Anyone as big and has a large footprint as like a Hilton or a JLL, right? Some massive property groups with a lot of upside there for charging in the future. But also as small as maybe one university who got 2 chargers. We're pretty flexible to provide solutions for really big clients or really small, depending on what they're looking for. And I think we often see a lot of the clients start with something like their first couple chargers, in that first year, and then grow from there to something like 8, 10, 12, 14 chargers, on and on. As I mentioned before, we're working with a lot of utilities, so that's been great. And then, of course, automotive and mobility, can't really leave that one out in the space of electric vehicles. Talking to a lot of the major manufacturers, and even have Goodyear, Hyundai, and SAIC Motors as an investor. So we're feeling the big push from the automotive industry. They're all sort of seeing the wave coming of electric vehicles. And I think it's going to take, communication, collaboration between all of us to get this right. So why do we need electric vehicle chargers, right? So according to the United Nations, right, the fastest growing global vehicle fleet is a major contributor to air pollution and climate change. A lot of talk about that right now, right? We have climate summits coming up, I believe, next week. U.S. infrastructure bill is on tap. I think the whole world is sort of realizing climate change is real, it's important, and electric vehicles will be an important part of that. Really, because transportation is one of the largest sources of emissions. So I think EVs will naturally help meet this challenge. Today, there are approximately 8 million electric vehicles on the road globally, and the market's growing at something close to 44%, right? Compounding annual growth rate per year. That's really, really fast. That's a lot of electric vehicles. It's a lot of cars. We know there's only going to be more. And so it sort of leaves this humongous question of where are they going to charge, right? People charge a lot at their home or where they work. It's really where they spend the most time. I myself, I'm an electric vehicle driver. I can't charge at home. What happens there? We'll go into that a little bit later. And some of these other, key stats, right? By 2030, electric vehicles are projected to make up to 30% of all vehicles in the world. Very ambitious goal. I think we're seeing the commitments, though, from the automobile companies and others really show that they're ready to do this. And the estimates right now, over 30 million new charge stations across the world. That's a lot of chargers, right? I'd say only a handful are, if you're on the ground like we are, you're only seeing a handful be installed a day, right? Maybe between all the EV charging companies in the US, we're seeing something like 500 to 1,000 a day, but we're seeing that growth rate get bigger and bigger and bigger. So 30 million is a big number, but I think we'll sort of see that slope go up pretty quickly, and find ways to really deploy chargers quickly and enable adoption quickly. This is just another chart sort of showing how staggering that EV growth is ahead. Something like 3x the amount of electric vehicle sales today is what we'll have in 2025. And it's not just one country, right? It's certainly here in the US, but it's United States, it's China, it's Europe, it's South America. It's growing everywhere exponentially. All right, so EV charging basics, I think these are really important, just to level set. How should you think of electric vehicle charging in general? I think it also helps the average consumer decide, hey, if I wanted to get an electric vehicle, what are the sort of the speeds of charging? Where do I charge? What's the difference between the different chargers that are out there? So I think to start, a level 1 charger, this is really the slowest type of charging equipment you can have. It's really just a standard plug. It usually comes with the vehicle. And by standard plug, I mean like 120 volt outlet or something like what you'd plug your iPhone into, right? It's a very, very slow charge. Gets you something like 3 to 5 miles of range per an hour, right? No, I don't think, not ideal if you take long road trips, if you have a long commute. But overnight, I think that can typically allow you to drive around town or run errands, and then come back and keep charging. So a full charge for a level 1 plug or charger, I think it could take well over 24 hours. And a lot of people have those level 1 plugs in their home. I think although they're slow chargers, if you're parked overnight, right, when you're sleeping, you're charging for 8 to 10 hours. That's pretty good to get you sort of fueled up for the next day. We are now seeing a lot of residents and then a ton of public, private, workplace, you name it, type of organizations adopt what's known as level 2 chargers. So this today, I'll say, is typically the most prevalent type of charger. Level 2 chargers operate on a higher voltage, right? So something like 208 to 240, and can be found in homes if you wish to put one in your home. But really, they're often found at businesses, workplaces, parks, really all around you. You usually just don't know it until you sort of look for them. They charge a lot faster than level 1. So they equate to something like 18 to 27 miles of EV range per an hour. And although that still seems maybe like, pretty slow or not enough miles, I can tell you from experience, I often charge at work. My car is parked at work for, 6 to 8 hours. That means I'm getting, well over 100 miles of charge. And if the longer I stay there, maybe I can even get a full charge if it's a long work day, right? So I think it's typically 7-8 hours to charge up fully. Depends on the car, but the level 2 chargers are what AmpUp is deploying at scale very quickly. And it's what we see the market adopting very quickly as well. There are a lot of workplaces, there are a lot of fleets, depots, public parks. They all want to, have their say in climate change and actually do something about it. And so they've been rapidly adopting the level 2 chargers as a more affordable and equitable way to allow other, to enable EV charging and sort of show their community as well that electric vehicles are here and that you can charge them anywhere, right? You can charge at the park where you are, you can charge at the supermarket. So the more of those, that are out there, I think the more comfortable people will be with electric vehicles. And then level 3 charging. So this really, the other name for this is DC fast charging. It's commonly referred to as that. These are the really, really fast chargers that you'll see typically near highways. And they're also typically used for the public, right? So if you're familiar with Tesla, right, they have a lot of level 3 or DC fast chargers along the highway corridor. And that allows anyone with a Tesla to charge up something like 100 miles of range in 15 minutes. Not quite as quick as a gas station yet, right? It's not 5 minutes in and out. But I can say 100 miles in 15 minutes is really good considering how far the technology's come to date, and it's only going to get better. We already know of some partners, working on fast charging stations that can do, something like 200 miles in 15 minutes. So that technology is going to get better. It's going to get cheaper. It'll be deployed in more places where it currently isn't. And I think that's really exciting to sort of help the adoption of electric vehicles long term. And then where is charging being adopted today? I mentioned this a little bit earlier. Typically, it's at home or where people work, but it really is increasingly in public spaces, in fleet as well. So what I sort of like about this is that there's a lot of opportunity, right? While AmpUp serves many different customer types today and plays in all of these spaces, right? We serve fleets, we serve workplaces, we serve single family homes. The market is growing so big that there are more entrants. There's room for more competition and more solutions, more and more every day. So while these numbers look pretty big and in the billions, they're only going to get bigger. And I think even this pie chart, you'll see even new segments be sort of formed here. There might be other operators of electric vehicles or hospitality, other customer segments that adopt electric vehicles where we otherwise thought they wouldn't. So I think that's going to be really interesting to see how that grows. And yeah, it's not just me with a passenger vehicle, right? this sort of goes as small as scooters, right, or electric bikes that we see in the cities, but as big as heavy duty trucks, right, 18 wheelers across the country, electrified, right? Hard to believe right now, but I think we're seeing that sort of evolve before our eyes from a lot of the automobile manufacturers. All right, so I think the next two slides are most important, at least to me. And if there's nothing else you take away from this presentation, I think the next two will be would be what I do want you to sort of learn from and walk away saying that's really interesting, that's really important. So the first is wide network charging, right? So charge stations come in a lot of different forms. Many are what we call dumb stations, meaning they don't have any they don't have any controls in them to be smart. So they don't have a cellular connection. They don't really have that microchip inside to allow the charger to do other things. So a non-network charger or dumb charger is one type. And then increasingly, the more popular chargers are what we call network chargers. These have things like a cellular chip in them, RFID readers, a lot of smart controls that allow the EV drivers as well as the station owners to do more. And so I like to highlight the main differences between non-networked and networked, because it's a question I get asked a lot. But I also think it's really important as the technology progresses and as adoption progresses that customers really, really consider getting a network charger and not just getting something that's non-networked. So the main reason here is, non-networked, there's no ability for a station owner to set a price, right? There's no network, right? There's no cell signal. So there's actually no way to even collect data from a non-network charger. It's really just a dumb plug, for lack of a better term. You plug, you take the plug, you put it in your car, you charge, and you take it out. This can be okay, maybe for single family homes and residential uses, but in general, it's not okay for utilities. It's not okay for fleets. If you have a fleet of EV drivers, you need to know, where are they, how much are they charging, what if something goes wrong, how do I maintain the station, how do I get customer support? If you're a city and you have a charger, you need a way to charge your customers to use that station. So a non-network charger, you can't do any of this, where a network charger you certainly can, and that's why I'm here to sort of advocate for that today. You can do things like set a price for that charger. Very similar. You could be a credit card reader, or it could be through a mobile app, right? So very similar to a gas pump, I think, is how a lot of people are thinking about it. Access control, right? You can determine who has access to that charge station. And that's all up to you as a station owner. That's something AmpUp is allowing you to do with our software. Energy data, right? Really, really important that the utilities know how much energy is being pulled from these charging stations. It's not just one charger they care about, right? It's the thousands of chargers that might all be in that utility service territory that could impact their grid. So AmpUp provides this data to utilities today, as well as a lot of our competitors and partners do. That's really important, I think, in the future, that a network station is really is mandatory, so the utilities can sort of plan for their own upgrades and make sure it's a safe grid and it's a safe charging project. And then things like carbon credits. These are increasingly I'll say important in California, but also coming online in many other states and definitely other countries. So there are ways to essentially earn money by offering your EV charging station to others. So if you can calculate how much energy your charge station produced, you can often get rewarded in a carbon credit for essentially operating that station. And then the rest of the stuff I like to put in the category of, I'll say smart features, but really, really impactful to our customers of late. So remote troubleshooting, I think, is really important. If you think about a lot of technologies you might have today, you're able to pick up the phone and call a customer support line and say, hey, something's wrong, right? I need help. Same exists here with AmpUp. in EV charging, right? Our name, our number, our email is on a sticker of every charge station that we operate. But we can also see a lot of this activity on our back end. So we can know often in advance what is wrong with the charger. Was there a transaction that got screwed up? Do we have to reimburse the customer? These remote capabilities to say, I can see the station online remotely. I can turn it on, I can turn it off, I can change the setting. That is all done through a networked charger, which is really important. And then reservations, right? I think I mentioned earlier, you can reserve a charger ahead using our mobile app. Often, right? There's no other way to do that unless that charger is really online and networked. And so to close out, I think this one is, it's really, what's interesting is all of this is enabled by a technology called Open Charge Point Protocol, or OCPP. And this is really a foundational technology that the entire industry is using right now to make EV charging smart, to make it networked, and to give people smart controls over their charge station. I really can't stress how important that technology is. It certainly helped us integrate with a lot of different partners very quickly. And it's also allowed our customers to have choice and control. And so the foundation of an open network, which is really my big second point here, an open charge point network, is that it allows customers the ability to switch. So there's a lot here on what's a closed network versus an open network. I think the best analogy I can use is the iPhone. So in 2008, when the iPhone was released, there was only one way to get the iPhone, at least in the United States. And those who might remember, it was with a 3 to 5 year contract with AT&T, and there was no other provider, right? I didn't have Verizon, T-Mobile. There was no other network provider I could get the iPhone with. So essentially, I was locked in if I wanted the iPhone, right? I knew I really wanted the iPhone, just like I might really know I really want this charge station. But I didn't know I'd have to switch to AT&T and that I couldn't get out of that deal for a very long time. Same thing has happened with EV chargers. So the last 10 years, there's been a lot of solutions that are closed, that they're a closed network. They require a multi-year contract, and their hardware does not work with anyone else's software. It's only their hardware and software and nothing else. So there's no ability to switch. The customer is limited on what charge stations they can get. And there's also a vulnerability to being locked in, right? They could increase that price or deliver poor service, and you're sort of stuck with that charger and that software, right? Unless you wanted to spend a lot of money to swap it out. And so that's been historically the past 10 years, most of the charging's been a closed network. Today, it's very different. And I think we're lucky to play in this space. It's a more open network. So today, as I said earlier, where AmpUp is integrated with, over 20 different hardware manufacturers. That's because that OCPP technology allows us to be an open network. So if a customer is unhappy with AmpUp after the first 90 days, no worries, money back. You can switch to another network, just like your iPhone, right? If you're unhappy with AT&T, you can switch to Verizon. If you're unhappy with the charge station you bought, well, maybe you really like AmpUp, but you don't like the charge station you bought, you can switch your charger and stay on the AmpUp software and network, right? Because we're integrated with so many different options. So for me, I think it's important just to tell customers or potential customers, you really want these things to be open network, and you really want to have that freedom to switch at a later date. I think that the industry is certainly warmed up to that. A lot of the hardware manufacturers have warmed up to that, and they're finally coming around and saying, yeah, customers deserve to choose whichever combination makes sense for them of charge station and of software. So that's sort of the big takeaway here. Stations need to be, one, networked, and two, open, right? To really protect consumers in the future, but also to give them a lot of choice up front today. And then to highlight a couple, really just one project, but I think it hits a lot of interesting points. in the EV charging space today. So we had the privilege really to do a really cool project with the utility National Grid in the city of Melrose, not too far from me here in Massachusetts. And the idea was, as a pilot project, put charge stations on a utility pole. And this is a very new concept. I think maybe, there was one other project in the US who had tried this, where this was done before. But if you can see from this picture over here, there's a charge station that was put up about 10 feet up on a utility pole. The cable has to be about 20 feet long, maybe further. And it retracts all the way up into the box. So essentially what happens is a driver pulls up to that parking spot, they scan a QR code using the AmpUp mobile app, and a cable falls from the sky and allows them to plug it right into their car. Really, really cool, right? And I think it took a lot of effort from a lot of different parties to get it done, but I'll go into sort of why this is important and where I think it can go. So the first sort of big lesson learned here was it required a lot of us to think outside the box. A pole-mounted charge station can serve densely populated communities where charging otherwise wouldn't be, right? So I think I mentioned earlier, I live in an apartment. I don't have access to a charge station at my apartment. So where do I charge? I charge at work, I charge at the public. If there were more of these chargers up on a utility pole nearby, that would be amazing, right? There are a lot of people who park their car overnight, on the side of the street, and they have nowhere to charge. If these chargers were above them on the utility poles, it's just opening a world of possibilities for charging access and equity. And then the utility told us about 70% of the installation cost was saved in putting the charger on the pole. I can't stress how important this is because typically charge stations are put right next to a parking spot on the ground. And the way that's done is it requires a lot of construction. So a lot of concrete has to be digged up. A lot of cabling has to be moved from an electric panel to the parking spot. That cost gets it very quickly into $10,000, $20,000. It's sometimes the biggest cost of an EV charging project. So to put stations on a pole saved a lot of money, which is really, really cool to hear. And then, having the charger 10 feet up on the pole, a lot of talk was, there's a lot of discussion on why this high up and what's the purpose. Here in Massachusetts, it gets pretty cold in the winter. So snow builds up, right? We don't want snow building up on a charger. So if you're 10 feet up on the pole, snow's not going to hit it. And then as well as other cars or really any vandalism concerns, right, are sort of removed by having the charger that high up in the air. No one can really access it and damage it. A car can't hit it. So we thought that was a really neat part of the project as well. Second lesson, diversification of partnerships. We worked with a lot of different stakeholders to achieve success here. So one was the electrician who had to climb up on the pole and put a charger up there, probably a first for them. Definitely the utility, National Grid, who really drove home the project to figure out which poles can we put these on and which makes sense which poles make sense to put a charger on them based on where do people live, right? We don't want to put a charger on a pole, behind a dump or something. No one will use them, right? We want them in high traffic public areas. The one you're seeing here in this image is at a golf course. There's about 16 others, mostly in downtown areas where people would typically park. The city of Melrose themselves, very important. They're the ones who are essentially in charge of these stations in their own city and determining what price do I set? How do I get the community to use them, those who are EV drivers? And then last is the EV drivers themselves, whether they are in the city of Melrose or from outside. We wanted to make sure it was easy for them to find the chargers on a map, which they are, and then also easy for them to use when they pull up. And then the last lesson here, equitable deployment. So there's a lot of incentive programs from utilities that help offset the cost of charging stations, but it's honestly been pretty difficult to deploy EV chargers in disadvantaged communities. So I think if you're to look into the research, right, most electric vehicles today are Teslas, and they're purchased by people who have the means to do so. They're maybe charging at work or charging at home, but what are we going to do for everyone else, right? If we want people to adopt electric vehicles, we need to put chargers in public spaces where they can be adopted by not just the most wealthy communities, but disadvantaged communities as well. So I think that was a learning moment here of, there was a conscious effort to put chargers in very public places, in high density and high population dense areas. So when people get an electric vehicle, they can use the station, but also just to send a message, I think, to the community and the broader public of, yeah, chargers should go, it should go everywhere, right? If level 2 chargers are going in at every mall and every workplace, we should really be putting them in places where people are parking the most, which is typically in downtown areas and sometimes those disadvantaged communities. So I just want to highlight that project. We were honored to be a part of it, and I was really excited to be there at the event. And now the goal is to do this a lot more, right? Let's get another. We have about 16 or 18 chargers in the city of Melrose on utility poles. The plan now, hundreds, right? Hundreds across the country. All right, and I want to leave you with, really, there's a couple last slides here on what to consider for your own EV charging project, right? And how are you going to get your community to adopt electric vehicles? So I think the first thing to consider here is the station cost. We talked a lot about that. There's a lot of different options based on different features and functionalities you need. So that research is always welcome. The installation cost is really the biggest point, and often the largest cost of the entire project. So it's labor, it's materials, it's electrical work, it's permitting, inspections, not the fun stuff. I think a lot of people imagine that comes with an EV, an electric vehicle charger, but it's the stuff we're involved with a lot of our electrical partners today, and it's honest work to get the projects done. And then operations and maintenance costs. So this includes what cost would you be paying on an ongoing basis to keep that charger running? So it's usually a cost you're paying to AmpUp to have access to software and operate, the charger, to do billing, to do access control, preventative and corrective maintenance, things like that. And that's an ongoing cost where usually the hardware or the charge station itself and the installation is a one-time cost. I think the most important thing you can probably ask your community, though, is I think a lot of people wonder, will they use them, or is it sort of a field of dreams approach? If I build it, will they come? I think our answer is a resounding yes. We have plenty of customers in the last couple of years who got their first or second charger, didn't really think anyone was going to use it, and now they're asking us, can we put 2 to 4 more chargers in? So it's a question to sort of ask your community, who are the user groups that would use these chargers? Is it the local town who just bought their first, is it the town who bought their first 2 electric vehicles? Is it the residents who are starting to drive electric vehicles? Is it the school? Maybe they got their first electric school bus. We have one of those on our platform. And then how do you want the community to use those chargers, right? Maybe you own a parking garage. Makes sense to you for you to maybe have a private charging station set up, if it's a private lot for just residents, right? Or maybe you own a very public area near a park. That's a great place to put a charger so the entire public can share that asset. And then, other questions we get, I'd say a lot of housing authorities and apartment complexes ask us how many, we tell them to ask how many EV drivers do they have in their community today, and how many do they expect to have in the future. And then how many parking spaces would you be willing to dedicate to EV charging? A lot of people share the charger. That's pretty common, something like a 4-to-1 vehicle to charger ratio. But others have said, I need a charger for every car. It needs to be fully charged every morning. So we provide solutions that are obviously tied to the software, but we work closely with the hardware and the electricians as well, to sort of drive a lot of this home. And then what's great right now in the industry, and I think it'll be here for a while, is the grants, rebates, and incentives that exist. So many states, cities, local utilities, they offer a lot of money for you to install an EV charger. Here in the US, there are some very rich programs, both at a federal level and a state level. So we encourage a lot of our customers to look into those and take advantage of them where they can. And then site selection, I think, is really maybe one of the most important. It's really looking at, you'll need a sort of a qualified electrician to come to your site and figure out where is the best place to put a charge station. There's a lot involved there as far as from an electrical standpoint, what's feasible. But again, that is some of the most important work that's done to make sure you build a site that can support your current EV drivers today, but also many more in the future. So there's a lot of factors that sort of go into that, but it's really good to get ahead of that as soon as possible. And then I want to leave you with so AmpUp has an EV charging playbook, we like to call it. Has a lot of these recommendations and best practices in it, as well as a checklist. And I like sharing this checklist with a lot of people because it helps them decide, are they ready for EV charging? And if not, what are the steps they need to take to start adopting? I won't go through them here. I think I touched on most of them in the last few slides. But this has been a really helpful, guide for a lot of people as first-time customers of electric vehicle chargers, and often first-time electric vehicle drivers. This is a side of the world that maybe a lot of the electric vehicle drivers don't even see. But I think it's equally important if we're going to have, millions and millions of electric vehicle cars, then the charge stations to support them and fuel them up is just as important. All right, Alan, I think that's all for me. Hopefully I didn't talk too fast, but I think we can do some Q&A now.
Yeah, well, thank you, Matt. A really interesting solution for EV charging. We all have that mindset of big petrol companies like Texaco, BP, just putting big petrol stations where you go with your car and put gas in the car, and doesn't have to be the same that way. It doesn't have to be the same way. Just only a few companies have to, the whole industry of charging or recharging, like gas station, putting gasoline in the cars, but you can also do this. So this is thinking out of the box. Do you have the people here, the attendees, do you have any question? Please use the Q&A box below or the chat below. Meanwhile, I would like to tell you that Colombia is the country in Latin America with the biggest growing rates of EV adoption and plug-in hybrids adoption. And actually UNIDO, the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, has been working with the Colombian Congress because they're working in a law project to promote the use of electric vehicles. And what we found there is that the biggest challenge are the charging options, where to charge, because also here in Colombia, we in the cities at least, most of the people lives in buildings, big buildings, apartments, and there's no options in their personal space to park the car, how to charge the vehicle. So I think this is a really interesting solution, and will be also maybe interesting to hear from you this how you approach to this, and maybe we will contact you, because we are working with the government and the Congress on this. So this is also something that we think they have to hear. So we will keep in touch just to see if you can help us also just bring this information to them.
You got it.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. So guys, do you have any question here? You can write in the Q&A box or chat box. Also, if you would like to make a live question, please raise your hand and we will open the microphone for you. Okay, here's all very clear. Thank you. Okay, the chat. Okay, so well, if there's no more questions, maybe we can close the session today. It's still, well, it is 10:58, so it's almost 11 a.m. So, well, Matt, thank you so much for being here. thank you to AmpUp and to Birch. She's not here, but we have been talking with her, presenting this opportunity also for charging and other options for charging e-vehicles. And like I say, let's keep in touch. Maybe we'll let you know if we need some support from your side to explain all these solutions to specific government institutions. So yeah, we'll be in touch.
Yes,
thank
you,
so
Alan.
much. Okay,
yeah,
thank you,
Unito as well. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so I will close the event in Spanish. Bueno, muchas gracias a todas las personas que han atendido el evento. Durante toda esta semana hemos tenido en promedio unos 100, 120 personas conectadas durante los 5 días. Yo sé que es difícil y claramente toda la gente tiene muchas ocupaciones y reuniones y trabajo, pero yo creo que bueno, ha sido bastante exitoso toda esta semana del Autotech Week. Hemos tenido, son 12 speakers durante toda la semana de empresas muy relevantes con soluciones muy diferentes, y lo que queremos en este evento, y como ustedes bueno, ya saben y lo hemos promocionado, es poder acercar todo la actualidad de la industria automotriz. O sea, esta es la industria automotriz en este momento en el mundo, esto es lo que está sucediendo, estos son los avances y la visión de futuro de lo que está pasando, y queremos claramente que obviamente tanto las OEMs, fabricantes de vehículos finales, como toda la cadena de valor Tier 1 y todas el gobierno y las empresas que están alrededor de la industria automotriz, las asociaciones también, vean un poco qué está pasando ya de primera mano por parte de los mismos que están desarrollando estas tecnologías, para que podamos asociarnos, tomar ideas y poder intensificar los esfuerzos en que Colombia sea un país que facilite este tipo de desarrollos, y podamos obviamente ampliar el alcance de nuestra industria a la industria tradicional que ya tenemos, que es de fabricación de partes y venta a clientes finales, a otras opciones que existen, como digamos lo hizo en su momento SEAT, con SEAT Code, pensando en qué otras cosas puedo hacer más allá de fabricar vehículos, o todas estas soluciones que están saliendo como AmpUp de carga compartida, bueno, y las soluciones claramente industriales de Industria 4.0 que vimos hoy con la gente de Pedro, y por la mañana también las soluciones de contacto con humanos en los vehículos, y los otros días también. Muchas gracias a todos entonces por participar. Bueno, último recordatorio, por favor. La rueda automotriz de negocios de la industria va a ser el día, bueno, va a ser a final de octubre, varios días a final de octubre. Por favor, inscríbanse. Hoy es el último día de inscripciones. En las redes de ProColombia y nuestras está la información. También hay una iniciativa de Colombia Productiva, Alianzas por la Reactivación. También es el último día de inscripción. Hay unos beneficios muy interesantes para las empresas que se inscriban. Entonces revisen toda la información en la página de Colombia Productiva, en las redes de Colombia Productiva o en nuestras redes. Y Promotion, como ya saben, este proyecto de la Organización de las Naciones Unidas para el Desarrollo Industrial cerrará este octubre 31, es el último día del proyecto, y todo el mes de octubre estaremos haciendo el campus automotriz, donde presentaremos pues todos los resultados y los avances que hemos logrado obtener durante los casi 5 años de proyecto con la industria automotriz, y obviamente gracias a la colaboración de COICA como donante de este proyecto durante estos casi 5 años. Bueno, muchas gracias a todos, y bueno, nos veremos ya en las próximas reuniones y próximos eventos que haremos durante todo el mes de octubre por medio de Promotion, la Organización de las Naciones Unidas para el Desarrollo Industrial. Que tengan un buen día y hasta luego.
Gracias a todos, hasta luego.